Thank you for taking time and joining us today. We would like to begin this presentation by taking a deep breath with you. Allowing ourselves to hold space and empathy for each other during these uncertain times. None of us in our wildest dreams could have imagined being in this particular moment, as the most basic parts of our lives, our community, our humanity has been shaken. I want to acknowledge that some of us may be experiencing some heavy emotional, economic, and even health-related issues in our household. I want to tell you, as support staff, we have been working nonstop to figure out ways to be there for our schools, our children, our students. In this presentation, we want to share what we have learned so far on the best ways to do what we need to do. And please know that there is so much more for us to address and do. Our team includes myself, Carla Alvarado Goldberg, one of the psychiatric social workers.
Hello, I am Vanessa De Leon, the A through G Diploma PSA Counselor.
Hi, my name is Marie Demers. I'm the Student Specialized Population Counselor.
Hi, my name is Emily Dillon, and I am one of the psychiatric social workers.
Hi, my name is Melissa Killian, and I'm the Healthy Start Navigator.
And my name is Taryn Laribas. I'm the Pupil Services and Attendance Counselor.
Before we get started, we want an opportunity to explain to you how to view this with captions in another language. So with the help of Ms. Vanessa De Leon, we'll go through the steps, both in English and in Spanish. So your first step will be to select the icon on the lower right corner of your YouTube video. It's the settings icon.
La primera cosa que ustedes necesitan hacer para ver esta presentación en español es seleccione el icono de configuración en la esquina inferior derecha del video de YouTube.
The next step will be to select the menu item titled Subtitles.
La segunda cosa es seleccione subtítulos del menú.
Third, you'll scroll down to select your preferred language.
Y tres, desplacese hacia abajo para seleccionar el idioma.
The goals that we have today that we're going to cover and the outcomes we hope you will take away from this is first understanding our collective trauma and grief, the impact of anxiety and depression, and learning how to cope during a global crisis. Also, we'll be presenting on strategies for how to cope with healthy coping skills and how to practice self-care. And also we'll cover resources that are present at our school, John Marshall.
So before we jump in to the bulk of where this presentation lies, we want to start with an inclusion activity to kind of get all of our mindsets in the same place. So we're doing this by looking at the shapes that are on your screen right now and thinking about how you feel in this moment. Select a shape that best matches how you're feeling. So for me, I could say that I matched the parallelogram on the third row because it feels somewhat normal for me because we've been doing this for such a long time, but it's still slightly shifted. Nothing is ever going to feel normal when you're doing it from home and you're not surrounded by the people that you normally work with. So taking that example, reflect on what shape best matches your mood. And once you've done that, take a breath and we're going to hop into the next slide.
So now I'd like to take some time to talk a little bit about the collective trauma of the current crisis we're experiencing. Before we get into it though, I do want to take a moment to look at this chart. I love this chart because I know it's helped me to ground in this very uncertain time. And it helps us to think about the things that we can control and the things that we cannot control. So I won't read through all of them, but I encourage you to look through them. Some things I can control are my attitude, deciding when to turn off the news, finding fun things to do at home. Examples of things I can't control are whether or not other people follow the social distancing guidelines, how much toilet paper is at the store, and how long this may last. So a lot is out of our control right now, but fortunately we do have control over some things in our lives. And by focusing on what we have control over and focusing less on the things we can't, we empower ourselves and we become healthier in a holistic way, especially during a time of collective crisis. So what is trauma? Trauma can broadly be defined as a normative or normal emotional reaction to a deeply distressing experience. Collective trauma can be defined as psychological reactions to a traumatic event that affects an entire society. So right now we are in a time of collective trauma, right? We are all experiencing a trauma as a society, as a community, as a school. Once we acknowledge that we are experiencing a collective trauma that's impacting every single person, we can better address the issues we are managing in our day-to-day lives, and we're more equipped to face larger issues that we're facing as a society. So what do we need right now? How do we deal with collective trauma in our day-to-day life? What's needed is collective empathy. So it's important to realize that everyone is experiencing varying degrees of anxiety, grief, and trauma. This includes our families, parents, caregivers, our students, our teachers, and all the other school support and administrative staff. We are all dealing with our own stuff right now and trying to make everything work while we're all at home, managing our many responsibilities and managing our anxieties. So collective empathy is key. So what is empathy? Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. So what does this mean? This means that we must act with compassion and understanding toward one another in order to honor the collective trauma, grief, and anxiety we are experiencing as individuals, as a community, and as a society. So I will now take us quickly through this short video that helps us get a better understanding of what empathy means.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb. but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
What a beautiful video. I love watching that. I've watched it a bunch, but I always like watching it. So we've talked about empathy. We've talked about the trauma that we're all experiencing. And so before we get deeper into all of that, I want to just provide a couple resources for coping with the collective trauma and grief of our current crisis. The first one is from Children's Hospital, and they do have the National Center for School Crisis and Bereavement. So this is a resource that they had previous to COVID-19, but now they have resources on that website specific to the coronavirus and to dealing with that collective trauma and that grief that we're all experiencing. Please don't worry about writing down any links right now. We will be providing all of this information in the YouTube description link, so please don't worry about that. It will all be there for you at the end. The second resource I want to give you is LAUSD's coronavirus resource page. So they have resources on there for educators, for parents, and for youth. And it has a lot of great stuff on there. I encourage you to check that out. Finally, I do want to let you know that I have created a virtual office website, missemilysoffice.com. And on that website, I have lots of resources, ideas for self-care and coping mechanisms, and all kinds of worksheets associated with that. I also have links to mental health resources and some other things on there. So I also encourage you to look at my website when you have the opportunity.
So looking at common responses to trauma. Now, these can be in your students, but in yourselves as well. And, you know, even amongst myself and my fellow presenters, when you're thinking about the trauma in general, but the trauma specifically associated with the pandemic, in the immediate, some of the things that you might experience or that your student might experience is shakiness or dizziness. I'm not going to read all of these, but sleep disturbances. I know that for me in particular, I could get regular amounts of sleep, but I wake up and I'm still exhausted. You're not sleeping as soundly as you were. Something inside is like causing that to be a problem. And one of those things inside that might be causing it to be a problem that's also on that list is anxiety, irritability, and anger. So somebody, say your partner is trying to do something nice for you, and it normally wouldn't bother you, but they just didn't do it correctly. And for some reason, it's like nails on a chalkboard. You don't even want to listen to them. That's something that previously wouldn't have bothered you, but because of everything else that's going on inside and everything that's going on with you, that might be something that bothers you now. So those are some of the things in the immediate that you might see as a response to trauma. Whereas later, and we can't say for sure in anybody because it's still going on. The pandemic is still something that we're dealing with, but in the future, things to keep in mind that you might see in yourself or in those around you, including your children. So that ongoing fatigue, never really feeling like you're fully recharged, feeling hopeless or powerless or worthless. So even within dealing with this trauma, I know that I can say that. At the beginning, I was really hopeful. Things were easy. I was able to get a routine, but the longer and longer it goes on, it's like, okay, what can I do? Like nothing is changing. And then a sense of not really being there. So just kind of feeling like dissociated. So not really feeling like you're in the world, feeling like you're seeing things from an outsider's perspective. And then one of the last things is that suicidal ideation and thinking about harming yourself or killing yourself. And that's one of the most serious ones that we really urge you to pay attention to what your students are saying, but also paying attention to what they're not saying. How are they actually acting? Is it different than they were before? But moving on from trauma, one of the other things that everybody could be dealing with as a result of this pandemic and this trauma is grief. So grief is commonly associated with when you lose someone, usually because they pass away. And even some of the little Post-its on the graphic, the different stages of grief are things that you might be familiar with. So the denial, the anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance, those are things that can still apply in this scenario. And some of the things that we really urge you to remember or be mindful of, or to take in if you didn't know this already, is those stages don't always go in order, especially in a time that's as uncertain and changing as it is now. So maybe at the beginning of this, you accepted it. Okay, we have to be in our homes, we have to social distance, that's fine. But the longer and longer that goes on, then maybe you get angry. You don't want to have to listen. Why are we still doing this? Then you go to depression. It's been such a long time since I've seen my friends. But then you go back and now you're angry. So it's not always that neat and pretty. Sometimes you can go back and forth and it's not going to go in a specific order. But the main thing to remember is that all of those responses, all of the orders that they go in or don't go in are normal, and it takes time to process all of this. So in addition to actual losses associated with the pandemic, so maybe you did lose a relative or a family friend or just an acquaintance to COVID-19, students are also experiencing their own form of grief, and that's something that we need to be sensitive of. So especially if you're the parent of a senior, those missed experiences. So they didn't get to go to prom. And that's maybe something that they were looking forward to and had been looking forward to all 4 years of high school. And then even if they're not a senior, those missed opportunities. Maybe your student's a freshman and it was the first year that they were going to be on the soccer team. They didn't get all those games. So being mindful that, yeah, those might seem like small things, but those are very important opportunities and experiences for the children and for your students that they didn't get to have. And that might cause a sense of grief. And then on top of that, minimal contact with their peers and their school community. So the teachers, yeah, maybe they don't like all of their teachers, but still not seeing the people that they're used to seeing on a regular basis, that's also going to cause a sense of discomfort and in many cases grief. So, and then not seeing all their family members, maybe because they're grandparents, you're worried about getting them sick, or going to church or to whatever religious service that you go to. You're not going to have all those connections. And so those are some things that can cause that grief response in our students and in ourselves. But things that we want you to keep in mind when you're thinking about trauma and grief is a lot of times, I know for me, it was really uncomfortable because I was responding I was getting annoyed when I shouldn't have been getting annoyed. And even to myself, I was like, why? Why are you doing that? Why are you acting like that? Or I was on the verge of tears for it seemingly out of nowhere. And I was just really uncomfortable with the fact that I couldn't name those things. But sometimes putting a name to that discomfort and putting a name to what you're feeling can offer a sense of relief. So maybe after hearing some of those reactions and those stuck out to you, you can say like, well, now I understand it's because I've been experiencing this trauma. So putting a name to it can be important. Going back to that picture with the fox on it that Miss Dillon went over, letting go of what you can't control is very important. So think about the things that you do have control over, and focusing on those is going to offer you a little bit more sense of relief. So just going forward, stay present, staying present in your own mind, staying present when you're with your, when you're with your family, when you're at work, be at work, when you're with your family, be with your students, be with your children. Try to leave work in the computer if you're working remotely, but try and stay present and feel what you're feeling. And then finding balance in those thoughts that you are having. There's always another perspective to consider. And whereas, yes, at the end of that video, it's saying not to necessarily silver line something, that's saying it to someone else, not to speak on somebody else's experience and try and downplay how serious it is to them. But in this sense, when you're reflecting on your own thoughts and your own feelings and trying to find a bright side, find a bright side that's also realistic. So yes, things are crazy in the world, but my kids are healthy. And so I'm going to focus on that. So find something that is positive, but also realistic, and try not to place that on other people.
Thank you, Ms. Laribas, for that invaluable information about grief and trauma response. Next, I will provide an overview to you all about anxiety and depression. Like Ms. Emily Dillon mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's essential for us to acknowledge that we are in the midst of a collective trauma during and due to a pandemic crisis. During these times of crisis, it's essential also for us to realize that feelings of anxiety are often heightened and increased. This might look like feeling nervous or irritable, having a sense of impending danger, panic, or doom, increased heart rate, breathing rapidly or dealing with hyperventilation, sweating, trembling, feeling weak or tired, difficulty concentrating, having trouble sleeping, or other health-related issues. So another thing that's important for us to recognize is that if any of these symptoms sound familiar, and if you feel like for yourself, or especially for your child at home, any child, whether it's a teenager or a young child, if you start to notice that these symptoms are starting to interfere with kind of their daily functioning, then it's important to recognize that it may be becoming a disorder, and at that moment would be a fantastic time to reach out to any one of the presenters here, and we'll provide more resources at the end to get some professional help. Next, I will review some statistics about teen anxiety specifically. If you want to review, you could see that an estimated 25% of US teens between the ages of 13 and 18 have suffered from an anxiety disorder at some point. One statistic that I really want to highlight is that about a third of those suffering from some type of anxiety actually receive treatment. And this is important to us because we want to make sure that we are getting the support to not only the families, but to the students, so that we can allow these students to be successful and reach the goals, whether they're academic, personal, that they want to reach. Again, I want to emphasize that these are statistics that were provided during a time of quote unquote normalcy, not during the pandemic or collective trauma. So as you can imagine, some of these statistics currently would probably be much higher. Next, I would like to review about depression. Depression in teens. Again, it's going to be repeated, but during this time of community crisis, this is also something that is heightened. And here you could see some factors that lead to depression: unrealistic academic, social, or family expectations. This is happening or has been happening since the school closures on a daily basis, where it's been a lot of unknowns and students unsure of what they're expected to do, how to reach out, where to gather information. So this is something that can sometimes trigger these depressive feelings, conflicting messages from parents, family, and society, especially as students are leaving high school and entering into whether it's the workforce or secondary education. Sometimes students feel very pulled in lots of different ways, and this can result into some depressive symptoms. Right now and anytime during the teenage years, it's really essential that parents remember that our teenagers are still children. They're still our children, and they need their parents' guidance more than ever in making healthy decisions and watching them model healthy behaviors. So it's very important that parents acknowledge that adult guidance is important. Some other factors that lead to depression that really these students or folks don't have control over, it has to do with brain chemicals, it has to do with biology, family history of depression. Oftentimes, if there's a family member older or within the immediate family that may have suffered from depression, that might also be inherited, difficult events, just as a death or divorce or COVID-19, side effects from medications. If there's another health issue, depression could be a side effect, and just a negative thought patterns. And hopefully we can provide you with some tools on how to work with negative thought patterns. The next slide is how to recognize adolescent depression. So some of this you all may have heard of. I'm just going to read them off for our folks that are listening to this presentation in a different language. Poor performance in school, withdrawal from friends and activities, sadness and hopelessness, lack of enthusiasm or energy or motivation, anger and rage, overreaction to criticism, feeling or being unable to satisfy expectations or ideals, poor self-esteem or guilt, indecision, lack of concentration or forgetfulness, restlessness and agitation, changes in eating and sleeping patterns, substance abuse, problems with authority, and suicidal thoughts or actions. Now, just really quickly about substance abuse, it's also important for us to recognize right now as teenagers, we have a lot of experimentation and different things that are going on, and we really want to focus on getting youth and folks support with substance and address that before we can get support with other mental health issues and concerns. And we luckily have both resources for you. Next slide, please. Here's another breakdown of some statistics prior COVID-19 of teen depression. As you can see, an estimated 20% of teens will experience depression before reaching adulthood. When teens recognize that they need help, this is a major step towards recovery, and this is for anybody, not just teenagers. So it's important for us to get in there and get them the support that they need. Few students seek help on their own, and definitely need the encouragement and support from family and friends.
Thank you, Ms. De Leon. And as you can see, we will get through this together. I want to acknowledge that our fears, our health, our economic hardships, our pain, our grief, our vulnerability and worry are real. And as support staff, we've been working nonstop to figure out ways to be there for our schools, your children, our students. We know this has been hard. We know you want your children back in school, and we know that you might have doubts about distance learning and its quality of learning. This has not been a smooth transition. Briefly, I want to give you some context. The first weeks of school, we focused mostly our energy on attempting to reach out to you to make sure that students had a computer and connectivity. And we immediately faced the same nationwide barriers of inequities and access. An overwhelming number of students didn't have computers nor connectivity. One of our biggest challenges was finding the most effective way to reach you, either through text, message, email, Blackboard Connect, Schoology, etc. We were successful with many, but not with some. Dr. Garcia and other staff drove out to families to deliver computers and hotspots. Another equally important focus was understanding how to best support our school staff. Our Health and Human Services team met weekly to brainstorm and strategize. We joined department meetings, staff meetings, coffee with the principal, joined Zooms with teachers, held office hours for staff, all with the intention to gauge where to support and how to support with resources. Many of you received phone calls from us. As staff and teachers, we also dove into a digital world without warning and minimal training. Some of us are great with technology, and some of us are diving in with technology anxiety. Anxiety during this time is a common reaction to a stressful event. Do you ever ask yourself, what is happening? How are we going to get through this? I know that in my family, my husband and our children ask each other this several nights a week. And honestly, we don't have an answer. But we clearly feel that we'll get through this together. As professionals, what we do know is that we are missing the connection with our students and colleagues. One helpful resource that I'll be referencing a lot during this presentation is a distance learning podcast by Louis Friedberg and Jonathan Fensterwall. It's called Making Students' Social Emotional Health Integral to Distance Learning. This podcast validated that yes, teachers are stressed out and they are worried that they are teaching virtually and at the same time have to take care of their students' emotional well-being. 5 weeks into the pandemic, here are some journal entries by high school students in Sacramento, showing us in their own words what this experience has been like. Play, please.
Lucia, Sean Turner, and J.J. Hill.
We need confidence and compassion from our leaders, but as the crisis grows, so does the inefficiency. It's a wild time to be alive, but honestly, I can't wait for this to be in the history books and for the next generations to learn from our leaders' mistakes.
My main worry comes from the safety of my mom. She's 61 and she's really scared of the whole virus. She talked to me today about how to access accounts and sell our house in the event of her dying, which of course made me scared too. Hopefully none of that is necessary.
Stuck inside of my house constantly, I'm losing track of the time and the date. It doesn't feel right that my birthday was only 2 days ago, but here I am. I just hope that it doesn't turn into some form of dissociation for myself. It's just the last thing I want.
And so, yes, one thing that all teachers are facing is the recognition that students are feeling anxious and stressed out as their parents may be. We also learn from our conversations with students that many of them are missing the school community. And we know that developmentally, having the connection to the school community is very important. Many times we see students having a hard time, and when we follow up with the parents to ask about it, they seem to be surprised. It's normal. Sometimes they want to protect us from what they're going through. And it's normal for your kids to be having a hard time. Indeed, we would worry about them if they weren't having a lot of mixed emotions. I hope that what you take from this is that what your child is feeling is normal and understandable. So where does this bring us? Cindy Morton, the superintendent of San Diego Unified Schools, the second largest district in California with over 100,000 students, notes, We can't teach them if you can't reach them. And we are embracing a whole child approach, addressing their social, emotional, and academic needs. We want to ensure that they grow personally and academically. And for this, we want to partner with you. Similarly to San Diego, I'm honored to say that we have been addressing mental health at school prior to the pandemic. We have the only student-led wellness center in the district and country. We have a strong team of Health and Human Services, as you can see, and the support of Dr. Garcia, our principal. And yet we still have a lot more work to do. We want to partner with you and collaborate with you so that we form strong parent alliances with you. We need you to join Schoology and the parent portal so that we can communicate and stay engaged with each other. And so I want to close with a message of hope. Dr. Wheeler notes that even during this pandemic, because of our collective experience that we were forced into, that out of this, the collective we, something new will be born, hope and renewed. So we're looking forward to our partnership with you as parents and our partnership with parents and teachers and students. We're going to get through this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alvarado Goldberg. That was very kind and inspirational, the words that you have given to us and the community. Now I would like to focus on things that we can control so that we can continue to be healthy and productive and keep our family safe during this time. In the following slides, I will highlight things that you can do with your family to keep them safe and healthy. For instance, how to protect your family during COVID-19. First thing you can do that we've heard multiple times everywhere is to wash your hands. Wash them frequently and wash them with soap and water. And if you don't have access to soap and water, you can use an alcohol-based solution to rub them dry so that they are free of as much bacteria and germs as possible. The next thing that you can do is to cover your mouth and nose with your elbow. So just like this, if you're going to sneeze, you sneeze into your elbow. Or use a tissue when you're coughing or sneezing, and then dispose of it as soon as possible. Avoid close contact with anyone who has a cold or a flu-like symptom is also a great practice to keep you and your family safe. Regularly cleaning and disinfecting things that are touched, such as surfaces, phones, doorknobs, light switches, and countertops is also very important. And if you need to, please do seek medical care early if you or your family or your child has a fever, cough, or difficulty breathing. You can give them a call at the phone number that's provided with your insurance and speak to somebody to see if you need to go in. So in addition to doing these different practices to keep your family safe from COVID-19, good practices to keep your family safe and healthy throughout the entire year is to focus on your eating habits. 5 ways to eat healthy include eating fresh fruits and vegetables. Children eat a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables, and if fresh produce is not available, frozen produce is also a great substitute. Adding dried and canned food is also a great way to stay healthy. You can include things such as dried rice, dried fruit, dried beans, and oily types of fish such as salmon or tuna. And get creative with snacks. You don't want to focus on the junk food that I personally love, like the chips and the candy or the ice cream. You want more diversity. Again, we want to stay healthy, so we want to focus on fresh and creative foods. So instead of those junk foods, you want to focus on nuts, cheese, yogurt, chopped fruits and vegetables. And a fun way to incorporate them is maybe cut them up into different shapes and sizes for your kids to enjoy. Also, to eat healthy, you want to limit processed foods. So you want to avoid as much as possible, and I know it's a little difficult depending on situations, but you want to avoid as much as possible prepackaged foods. They tend to have a higher concentration of fat, sugars, and salts. So a good way to check is always by checking the labels to see what percentage all of these products have in them. And avoid sugary drinks like soda instead of opting for water, and maybe a flavored water. The important thing here is to really just do the best that you can. Again, everyone's situation is different, and we may not have access to all of the fresh produce that others may have. But whatever we have in our pantry that we find that is healthy, full of nutrients, is the best that we can provide for our families. And it's important to also cook as a family, because that draws back to the connection of being a part of our family and enjoying something together. If you do not have access to fresh food on a regular basis, there is an option right now through the Los Angeles Unified School District, which we are calling Grab and Go. At our different sites, which are at different schools around the districts, we have partnered with the Red Cross to provide meals to students in need. You can go there Monday through Friday. It is open from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. I've listed 4 different locations that are closest to John Marshall High School. At these different locations, you go there and you tell them how many individuals in your house need food, and they will provide you food for that day. So for more information, you can go to this website that's listed here, or to our school district hotline number, which is 213-443-1300, and somebody there can give you more information. Again, this is a great resource if for some reason you're having difficulty accessing food on a regular basis. They can provide you meals for that day. In addition to the way that we are eating to stay healthy, it's important to exercise. It's important for both adults and for children to exercise every single day. So children need to be exercising and moving for at least 60 minutes a day. Exercise helps to reduce stress, it lowers blood pressure, prevents disease and illness, and improves sleep, increases academic performance, and boosts mental health in general. So you can imagine right now, when we are very stressed out because of everything that's going on, that it is even more important right now to be moving. It doesn't have to be just simply getting on a treadmill or riding a bike. It can be anything. It can be taking an exercise class online. It can be doing yoga. It can be simply turning on some music and having a dance party with your kids. Just moving around, moving your body as much as you can. Be silly, have fun with it, and just get moving.
Thank you so much for all these helpful tips on how to stay healthy, Ms. Killian. So from everything that we've covered so far, it's clear that we've all been through a lot in the past several months. So it was also important for us to provide you ways that you can take care of yourself, and also ways that you can best support your child. But to start with, I really wanted to start with this quote that we added to this slide, which says, "You cannot pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first." So, and I know that in airplanes as well, there's a say that always put your oxygen mask first before you help someone else, because if you don't help yourself, you cannot help anyone else. So we want to tell you, we know as parents, we tend to want to put all of our energy and care in our children, but if we run out and our tank gets empty, then we can't help anyone. So we're just going to go through some of the ways that you can take care of yourself and your emotional well-being. First of all, by connecting with friends and family. We know right now it's really hard. We're isolated, and as human beings, we need this connection so much. And so make it a point to reach out, to talk, to text, to FaceTime if you can, to see them, hear them. Also make space to express your emotions, right? Allow yourself to cry and talk about your feelings. We know as adults, sometimes we want to look all put together and strong and independent, but that doesn't model to our children that they are allowed to fall apart. And we all are, right? Also find activities that make you happy. This is a great time to look over your life and be like, what brings me happiness? What makes me enjoy a day more than others? So make an inventory, and then make sure that you make a point of making those things that makes your stomach feels like a butterfly and you want to smile. Work on your marriage and other relationships. I know these are hard times and there's a lot already, but anything that will increase connection with the people that are close to you will hopefully bring some happiness and a little bit less weight on your shoulder. And please learn to say no. This is not a time to go above and beyond. This is a time to stick to what you're comfortable doing. So be okay, be strong, and say, no, I cannot take this on. There's a lot that has to go first. Yourself, your children, your family members that may be living with you. So no is a really great answer right now. Give yourself time, quiet time for self-reflection. I personally love journaling. Sometimes my head and my thoughts get all tangled, and the only way I can make sense of them is for me to shut down everything around me and just start writing and writing. And sometimes I'm like, oh, this is the thing that's been bothering me. So give yourself some quiet time to reflect on what's been bothering you, and use whatever way you know and that works for you. I know that a lot of churches have been closed, but they are slowly reopening. So if you do have a place of worship that you have been going to, and you know that they're reopening, get information and see if you can start attending those places again. Write in a journal, like I said. Spend time in nature. That's another thing that sometimes it's hard in big cities. We get, everything is crazy, goes fast, but if you have time to just go walk outside, take a deep breath of fresh air, go somewhere in a park where it's green around you, it's a very great way to resource yourself. And maybe take on a new hobby, right? Like there's so many videos that have been created through this so that people can for free teach themselves a new skill that you've always been wanting to try. So go for it. Just try something new. It might bring some unexpected sunshine. Next slide, please. Okay, so as parent, I'm a mom as well, and I feel like anytime there's something hard happening, I always want someone to give me like specific tools on how I can better support my child. So we also felt it was important to give you some tips on what you can do in support of normal reactions that your children may be experiencing right now. And, we know that this has been extremely stressful. You're probably dealing with, having a hard time paying bills, unemployment, housing, even the health, your own health, your loved one's health. There's just a lot going on. And so we're hoping that these tips can help you feel a little bit better equipped on how to handle some of your child's reaction. So if your child is complaining of physical symptoms such as headaches and stomach pain, a good way is to provide reassurance and explain to them that often our body will give us signs that we're stressed out, right? So like a headache and a stomach pain can be totally normal in times of stress and trauma like we're experiencing right now. So maybe you can offer them like the slide that we just presented. Maybe you can take an inventory with them of things that they enjoy doing that you can support them in practicing more right now. If your child is like, you're noticing that they're either sleeping less or sleeping more, or they don't want to eat, or they're like actually always hungry, encourage them to continue to have a routine. I know it's hard for teens mostly right now. Suddenly they like want to sleep in, and they kind of can if they don't have a Zoom or something planned, but really sticking to a routine will help all of that to kind of stay more normal or the way it was before. So encourage bedtime and rising around the same time. Meals, same thing, like still have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If they have chores that they were doing before, encourage them continuing. Definitely a time for their schoolwork. And like Miss Killian said, exercise. They need to move. Even though they feel lazy, their body needs it, their brain needs it. And we know it's been proven that children thrive in routine. So to have this routine, even though they may seem annoyed at first by it, is actually helping them in the bigger picture. If your child has big emotional changes, they go from anger to sadness to frustrated to anxiety. Well, we covered a lot, right? We know it's normal. Right now, they will probably go through this roller coaster of different emotions. And so acknowledge that. Remind them that it's normal. Remind them that it's safe for them to share with you the way that they're feeling and to talk about it. But it's also, they might not want to talk to their parents about it, and that's also okay. Then you can ask them, like, who's another adult in your life that you trust that you can talk to, whether it's an aunt, a teacher, someone in who they feel like they can confide in. And so do not force the conversation. I know I'm a mom, sometimes I'm like, but I'm your mom, you can tell me everything, right? But sometimes it's best to say, I see that right now you don't want to talk about this, but I want you to know that I'm here, and when you're ready, I will always be here. So it gives them like the control of deciding when they want to have a hard conversation. If your child has been isolating from their peers and their loved ones, express the important, like let them know like that it is important. It might feel hard, but like let them know that this in the end will help them, and offer support in like how they can connect. Be like, hey, let's call Auntie someone right now and let's talk to her, or whatever way that you can support them to connect. And as a parent, implement some family time or some family routine. Like, again, Miss Killian said, like the cooking that you can do, the dance party, the singing, like anything silly that lightens the mood is a great time for you to implement that in the routine. And then if your child has concern or fears around COVID-19, try to limit the media exposure that they have to it. And I know it's hard if they have their own cell phone, they can research it, but maybe give them a time where, you know what, like this is the time you can have access to your phone and you can only contact people, don't look at the news. Just try to encourage them, or at least tell them that it might make them feel worse if they are on the news too often. And encourage them to share, like, what have they read or seen that is making them fear a certain aspect of the COVID or the whole of it. And then lastly, as we talked about, teach them actionable steps that they can take, that they can do, that are in their control to stay safe. And to end this, as parent, we will never get it 100% right? Like, you guys are probably stressed out, your child is stressed out. These are just tips. But if you mess up, if there's something that didn't come out right, or you feel like you lost your patient too fast, which I've done on a daily basis with my son, know that the repair and apologizing and going back to your child and be like, hey, can I have a do-over on this, is just as important as the initial response. So don't beat yourself up. There's always a chance to like go and apologize and and model how that we can do that for our children. Thank you. Okay, well, so this was a lot of information, and we're not expecting every one of you to remember all of that, but that's also why at Marshall, there are a lot of resources that you can come and call us and meet with us so that we can review some of those things with you. So we have all of the school-based support who are all of us right now on this presentation that are at the school. We also have the Asian Pacific Clinic that is also on campus, that they can provide you with mental health resources and also physical exams and all of that. And we have the Health and Human Services Healthy Start Office with Ms. Killian, who provides tons of resources as well, such as individual and group counseling. It can be teen pregnancy and parent support, case management, student attendance and academic support, mental health referrals and resources, and basic needs assistance like clothing, food, and all of that. So please, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to one of us. We have a lot of resources and we want to be there for you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Demers. And just to piggyback off what she was saying about the Healthy Start office, one of the things that I really want to make sure is clear, because sometimes it can feel like, oh, I just talked to this person and told them everything, why do I have to tell you? Healthy Start is really kind of a catch-all. So you may talk to Miss Carla, you may talk to Miss Emily because something, you know, your student was in a crisis or something happened in that one particular moment. But because they're dealing with the crisis of the entire school, once they've managed at that point, then a lot of it does end up going to Miss Killian. So you will at some point, it's great to be connected to that office because it means that you've probably already worked with one of us and been connected through Marshall already. But outside of Marshall, some of the LAUSD resources that we wanted to highlight were the family source centers. So these are partnerships between the school district and the city of Los Angeles. There are multiple locations throughout the district. The two closest to us, there's one that's located on Sunset that's closer to Echo Park. And then there's the Breezy Foundation, which is closer to those families that live near LACC. It's kind of right on the edge of K-Town and Silver Lake. But at these centers, they're manned by, well, a multitude of staff, but the people that you would be connected with from the school are pupil services and attendance counselors, and they can help you really navigate to find out what does your family or what does your student need, and then how can they get you connected. And some of the things that they can get you connected with are family support services, so parenting classes. If you're having difficulties with your student and you're really feeling like you need more resources yourself, mental health resources for your student or even for yourself. Basic needs. So sometimes our students need help and our families need help with bus fare, or you have a newborn child and you need diapers. Miss Killian can help with that, but so can they. And then getting you connected to food banks, things of that nature. Tutoring and other support programs for education, employment and financial assistance. They can also help with housing support. So sometimes it can be connecting you to resources that can find housing, but also can help pay with rent if something is going on at that time. So they have tons of services. Each one of them has generally the same services, but some have, you know, one service that the other one doesn't provide. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in any of these services, either reaching out to either of those centers, or when we do come back to school, reach out to one of us and we can get you connected.
Thank you, Ms. Laribas. In addition to all the resources that you have heard, LAUSD has wellness centers throughout the district. And the two closest to us are the Belmont Wellness Center and the Roybal Wellness Center. Prior to the pandemic, therapists from these centers, these wellness centers, would be on campus at Marshall providing counseling services to students that were in need of mental health services. Currently, during this pandemic, we are not connecting students to the Wellness Center, but you are definitely welcome to call them to ask for resources. Depending on what happens in the fall, we will continue with the same referral process. Usually what ends up happening is that one of the members from the team, from the Health and Human Services team, submits a referral, and the therapist from the Wellness Center contacts you to conduct an intake, and then you decide where the counseling services will be offered. These are counseling services for students in all of LA Unified, and no insurance is required. There are service in the district that is there for all of you. Realizing that there are so many services is really important. But I also want to recognize that the hardest thing and the first step to take is to say that it's okay not to be okay, and to seek out support. Know that we are in this together and we'll get through this together.
I just want to take a moment to thank our amazing Health and Human Services team. I love working with them. This group of strong women, they're amazing. And I hope that we have been able to provide as a team some useful resources and ideas, and have given you information that you can use in your own life, with your family, and with your children. We just want to say thank you for viewing this, for taking the time out of your day to listen to our presentation and to be a part of this learning. I do want to leave you with a few resources for the summertime and some resources to have in general. So first, I want to highlight the LAUSD hotline, which is open during the summer. The phone number is here on the screen. It's 213-443-1300. And again, all of these resources will be listed below. I also want to highlight the LA County Department of Mental Health. This is a 24-hour line. If you or someone in your family or a loved one or friend is having a mental health emergency or crisis, this is a line that you can connect to. And the number is 800-854-7771. Another resource is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Again, this is a 24-hour hotline for somebody who is experiencing a mental health emergency or crisis. And that number is 800-273-8255. Please remember that, as I said before, the links to all of these resources are below in the YouTube description. We have a big list for you there, so you can look through that and get links to all the different resources and phone numbers and websites that we've talked about. And please don't forget to click on the link in the YouTube description to provide us feedback as well. We have two surveys, one in English and one in Spanish. We would love to get feedback on this presentation and would love to hear from you to find out what type of learning you would like to see in the future and how you would like to connect with us at Marshall. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We wish that you stay well and stay safe, and please reach out as needed.